Howdy. This is from the top of the Outokumpu, the strange hill in English, which is the hill in Outokumpu, the city, where they found the copper ore. And this is how it looks today. And obviously you can see rather far. And there is another mine there in the background. I tried to zoom in, but that's just a cell phone, so the quality is what it is. But as you can see, the sight is amazing. You can see very far. And I have been talking about the copper, the sulfur, and Venus. Several times I tried to make a video about it, and then it turned into a hexology, 6 videos, which then just expanded. So you might have to take a look at some of those videos first, but I also made those microwave experiments, which were very interesting, and they are continuing. I'm doing them every now and then. I just don't really have time to make videos and stuff about all these. And I tried to get a paper together. And some time ago, I attended a presentation from an archaeologist here about the ancient times here in Finland, and he showed slides during his presentations, and they were very interesting. I won't show them because I don't know if I have the rights to show them, but I have pictures of them because they were interesting. Especially one was very interesting because it was talking about the start of the Bronze Age, which is also told here on Wikipedia, free for everyone. The Bronze Age of Finland is considered to have started around 1500 BC, and which lasted until about 500 BC. So, this sparked a rather interesting thought. You know, I wasn't prepared for that thought. It just popped up immediately as I sat there and listened to the archaeologists, like those maybe 80 other people. And I was very close to just jump up and tell it to everyone. But I didn't. I just sat there and tried to settle myself down because I realized one thing. Listen, the Bronze Age, which started around 1500 BC, it started suddenly. And I came to the conclusion that since it is not possible to make bronze, which is composed mostly of copper, and there's a little bit of tin mixed within, and if it's nickel, it's cupronickel. It's even better than bronze. But anyway, you cannot make bronze or you cannot make copper. In other words, in order to have something like a Bronze Age going down anywhere on Earth, it requires bronze. You know, there is no Bronze Age if there is no bronze, or let's say copper, because bronze is just like its most part. Let me show you. Let's write bronze here. I missed. Bronze. Bronze records. No. Give me a second. So now I had to switch to wikipedia.com. Bronze. Bronze is an alloy consisting primarily of copper. commonly with about 12 to 12.5% tin, and often with the addition of other metals including aluminium, manganese, nickel or zinc. So, in order to have this kind of mixture, whatever you will mix into the metal afterwards, you need the copper. Because you cannot make it, you know. It has to be found somewhere. And in order for ancient people finding this, it cannot be buried thousands of meters below the ground. It has to be basically on top of the ground. And as I have shown in my paper, the first part, the influence of electricity in rock forming processes and stuff like that, I found molten metal on top of rocks. And as you have seen in the beginning, from the top of the Outokumpu, which means strange hill, from the hilltop of Outokumpu, you can see very far, and the whole mountain is basically made out of copper ore. It's copper, and there is a lot of sulfur and sulfides. All sulfides are a mixture of sulfur. It's without sulfur you don't get any sulfide. And there are many of sulfides, and sulfur can be found in many different kinds of forms. As I have been talking about in my copper videos previously. Yellow sulfur, when you heat it, it starts to get red, it starts to smell, and it burns with a blue flame and all kinds of stuff. So, you cannot make it. You have to find it somewhere, and then you can process it. You can start to melt a rock or heat the rock, and the copper will drain out of it, and you get sulfur and stuff like that. But you cannot make the copper. This means it had to come from somewhere. I have been talking many times about the surface conductivity anomaly of Finland. The quite likely reason for why it's so often so sunny here in eastern Finland. Because of the copper mine, and the copper mines are part, or they are belonging to the surface conductivity anomaly, which has a vortex structure which might be the imprint of an ancient Birkeland current, which means there has been once the magnetosphere of Earth collapsing, and the polar cusps of the magnetosphere touched the Earth, the ground, a touchdown. And since this event was probably rather violent, many stories have been told about great fires in the skies, the flames shooting up from the grounds to the heavens, and many other stories. There is quite much water also included in all of these stories, with floods and stuff like that. And we have very strong winds, which carried away mountains and probably smaller things too. So, you cannot make copper. You cannot make gold. If it would be possible, they just would make it and no one would dig anywhere anymore. There would be no mining operations anywhere in the world because you just couldn't make it. But it doesn't work like that. Because I think the things you actually need in order to make such a thing are not from this Earth. They might be part of the solar wind, charged particles from the sun, and we have to remember that back in the days there has been planetary encounters of many kinds. Our solar system hasn't been like it is for the past 4.6 billion years as they are claiming. No, we have all those mythological stories about all the gods, which after all representing planets, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and so on. So now let's go quickly to alchemy. We are still on Wikipedia, believe it or not, but you can find very interesting things on Wikipedia. Alchemical symbols originally devised as a part of alchemy were used to denote some elements and some compounds until the 18th century. Afterwards, we had Darwin and Newton and all those other guys. Afterwards, they invented things like dark matter, dark energy, black holes, plate tectonics, and many other funny things. But until the 18th century, they were used to denote some elements and some compounds. But let's go a little bit deeper, or let's scroll down. Yeah, that's probably the best word for this, because I try to keep it short. 3 primes. Yes, in my hexology about the copper, I speak quite much about sulfur. And I think sulfur is not from that earth in this region here where I am. There are, in Campifligrade, there is Sulfurata, one of the craters of Campifligrade. The Romans, and probably also the ancestors of the Romans, if there has been already some kind of volcano at the vicinity, they were collecting the sulfur which comes from the earth. I know it's possible it does happen on Earth, but there is no volcanoes in Finland. Probably no one of those ever have been really here, because the Moho, which is a layer in Earth, is very deep. And in other places where we have much volcanic activity, it is rather shallow. But anyway, that's a theme probably for another video. The Moho is something very interesting. According to Paracelsus, the 3 primes of Tria Prima, of which material substances are immediately composed, are sulfur, or Sol, of combustibility, mercury, or spirit, the principle of fusibility and volatility, salt, or body, the principle of non-combustibility, combustibility, and non-volatility. So, sulfur seems to be an important thing, not only in geology, but geology is an all-encompassing topic. Because after all, we are made of stardust. Yeah. That's why geology is very interesting. Seven planetary metals. The 7 metals known since classical times in Europe were associated with the 7 classical planets. These figured heavily in alchemical symbolism. The exact correlation varied over time, and in early centuries, bronze or electrum were sometimes found instead of mercury, or copper for Mars instead of iron. However, gold, silver, and lead had always been associated with the Sun, Moon, and Saturn. Saturn, the old sun, the good sun. Because once upon a time, Saturn was our sun before we had the sun we have now. And for a while there has been even 2 suns. But now, for the time being, we are dealing with the sun we have now. But anyway, the associations below are attested from the 7th century and had stabilized in the 15th. They started breaking down with the discovery of antimony, bismuth, and zinc in the 16th century. Alchemists would typically call the metals by their planetary names, e.g. Saturn for lead, Mars for iron. Compounds of tin, iron, and silver continue to be called jovial, martial, and lunar, or of Jupiter, of Mars, and of the Moon. Through the 17th century, the tradition remains today with the name of the element mercury, where chemists decide the planetary name was preferable to common names like quicksilver, and in few archaic terms as lunar caustic, silver nitrate, and Saturnism, lead poisoning. Lead corresponding with Saturn, tin corresponding with Jupiter, iron corresponding with Mars, gold corresponding with the Sun, copper corresponding to Venus, quicksilver corresponding to or with Mercury, silver corresponding with the moon, copper corresponding with Venus. How should they know? From what source or how these things could be related to any planet? If not, some ancestors have seen the event, witnessed the polar lights coming down to Earth, creating havoc and destruction, reshaping the surface of the Earth, literally. After the events, there was sulfur and copper, probably intermixed with other metals too, such as tin, which corresponds to Jupiter. For those who know about the polar configuration, there is Earth, Mars, Venus, Saturn, and behind Saturn is Jupiter. And all of those had interactions with each other. And as I have shown in part 3 of 6 from the Finnish copper might have its origin on Venus or from the interaction with it, Venus, the sign of Venus, which is the sign of copper. Yeah, that's from the actual video. That's the coat of arms of Outokumpu. And I've been speculating that the yellow and the red might be some representation of the sulfur, because the sulfur you find here is mostly yellow, but if heated over 200 degrees it turns red. And there is the story about the troll which lived in the mountain, which burned off his golden treasures, and he burned off the mold of the golden treasures. And probably the people here haven't ever seen or smelled sulfur before, so they associated the smell of sulfur with mold, the only thing they probably knew, because there is no such thing here as like any volcanic activity which would produce sulfur in order for the people to have some experience with it. They just smelled it and thought, yeah, this smells moldy, but it might have been actually sulfur. And all this happened because of very strong induced electrical currents, geomagnetically induced strong telluric currents, which heated the mountain and the soil so much that there started to emerge the smell of sulfur. So, but after all, the whole reason why I made this video is just something, you cannot make yourself to have epiphanies or these kind of things. They just happen like that. And they're amazing. The Bronze Age, yeah, I have to translate it probably. I use a translator of Google because it's easier. The text would change if you go to a different language on Wikipedia, also the content. But anyway, the Bronze Age of Finland is considered to have started around 1500 BC, which correlates extremely well with what Velikovsky explains in Worlds of Collision. And afterwards, after the Bronze Age, first we have the Bronze Age. And I think the bronze or the copper better, it's the main product or the main material what bronze is made of is copper. So you need copper. The copper came from the interactions with Venus, also did the sulfur. Venus had 2 close encounters with Earth. And afterwards there has been still stuff going on in our solar system. So Mars approached Earth several times. And the thing is, first we have the Bronze Age from the encounter with Venus, and afterwards we have the Iron Age, and Mars is the iron. And this also goes very well with what Velikovsky is explaining in Worlds of Collision. In order to have an Iron Age going on, you need at least iron. In order to have a Bronze Age going on, you need at least copper. Right? Because you cannot make those things. You just can extract them from the rock, but you cannot make them. And I think they have their origin on other planets, and because of the encounters, those ages started just exactly when they started. Sometime after the encounters, because stuff had to cool down, the dust has to be settled, and people get themselves together in order to figure out what's going on now. Now check it out! What's that shiny thing here? Let's chip it off a rock and form it into something. We have our first bronze axe, because we just found this kind of piece of molten metal on top of a rock. We didn't have to dig many hundreds of meters below ground, and we didn't have any sophisticated drill borehole equipment or whatever, magnetic satellites. No, we had to find the stuff basically on the ground. Yeah. Yeah, you need bronze in order for Bronze Age. You need iron in order to have an Iron Age. And they were provided by the planets and the interactions with the planets. Yeah. I think it's a very intriguing thing to think about. What do you think about this? I'm not claiming in a way that somehow I would be the correct one whatsoever, but at least I have been thinking about this, and it struck me, because time-wise they go so well together, all the mythological stories. That's amazing. It's really amazing. But anyway, there's stuff to do, like writing and stuff. Thank you. Bye.